He's coming around to I think the realization that Vladimir Putin won't stop until he is stopped. And I think what's really going to be important, Callum, is this phone conversation that President Trump has with European leaders this week.
We are building up to the meeting, the summit between President Trump and President Putin in Alaska on Friday to discuss progress towards ending the war in Ukraine. Territorial concessions are expected to be on the table, but Europe and especially Ukraine firmly against any redrawing of borders in this way. Let's speak to retired US General and former National Security Advisor to President Trump, HR McMaster, who joins us on the programme. Good afternoon.
Hey, Callum, good to be with you.
It's great to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we should consider, first of all, how this is moving through the course of this week, really. There's growing EU concern. There are fresh Russian offensives. The implications for this summit on Friday, for the trajectory of this conflict, are significant.
Yeah, they're very significant. And I think really what Putin wants, and I don't think he's going to get it, but what he wants is President Trump to support an agreement, a draft, territory swap or something that is unacceptable to Ukraine, and to cast Ukraine as the main obstacle to peace.
Will he be successful?
I don't think so, because I think President Trump is coming around. I mean, it took a while, I guess, but he's coming around to I think the realization that Vladimir Putin won't stop until he is stopped. And I think what's really going to be important, Callum, is this phone conversation that President Trump has with European leaders this week. And I think that they're likely to emphasize 2 points that I think will resonate with Trump, because it's consistent with Vladimir Putin's track record. And the first of these is that this war in Ukraine, Russia's war on Ukraine, is connected to all of our security, to European security broadly, but really connected to our competition with an axis of aggressors that is acting together really to fight a war against Europe and the West, through the Russians, almost as a proxy. And of course, this is Russia pursuing its designs on, recreating the Russian Empire. It is Iran in its support for Russia with Shahed drones and Shahed drone factories. It's North Korea providing 30,000 more troops now and 12 million rounds of artillery. But it's really China, Callum, that is underwriting the entire effort financially, with energy purchases, but with the electronics and the hardware and other equipment that Russia needs to sustain its war-making machine. So I think, point one, connect what's happening in Ukraine to the broader competition against this axis of aggressors who really want to rewrite the rules of international discourse in a way that cuts against our interests. And the second is, and we know this from Putin's track record, he won't stop until he's stopped. You don't really need to allay his security concerns. You need to demonstrate strength and convince him that he's losing the war, or that he can't continue the war at a cost that's acceptable to him.
You have previously spoken in your book, in fact, about when you were, I think, there was perhaps a bit of tension between you and the president. This was in July 2017 at a previous kind of Russia meeting, and you described it was described at the time as a budding bromance between the US and Russian leaders. Your warning to the president then was, do not be a chump. Is there a risk that President Trump is going to be a chump on Friday?
I'll tell you, Putin is a master at playing world leaders, right? I mean, they've got these psychological profiles in the FSB and the GRU, and they play to leaders' egos, right? Hey, anybody who's like a leader of a country who had to run for office, they've got an ego. So what Trump will do, what Putin will do, is he'll tailor the message to whoever it is. So think back to George W. Bush. Remember, George W. Bush met Putin. Putin let a crucifix dangle out of his shirt, and he knew that President Bush was going to ask him about it. And he said, well, George, let me tell you that this is my grandmother's. Her house burnt down. It was the only thing left. I've worn it every day. A total lie. It was a total lie, right? And then the same thing with President Obama, that we could do some great things together. And so you get the reset policy under President Obama. Remember, President Biden went to Geneva to lay out our red lines with Vladimir Putin, which Putin took as, hey, I can do everything else. President Trump also labored under this delusion that he could come to some kind of grand agreement with Putin. It would be good for world security. They could reduce nuclear arms. They could work together on all these global issues. I mean, really, it doesn't work with Putin. What Putin respects is strength And I think that President Trump has come to that conclusion. And what Putin will do, Callum, is he'll execute like a 4-point plan with President Trump. And this is, of course, again, as I mentioned, not unique to President Trump.
Mm-hmm.
He'll try flattery. Remember when Steve Witkoff went to meet him, and he presented Steve Witkoff with this portrait of President Trump, and said that he had gone to pray for him and everything. I mean, come on, really? And so but flattery, then that will bridge into a sense of mutual aggrievement. We've both been treated so unfairly, and we're kind of in the same boat, you and I. We'll try to create that kind of sense of mutual agreement. The third, as I already mentioned, will hold out the prospect of a big deal. And President Trump loves big deals, right? So they'll say, hey, we could do a big deal on this or that, and look how we could work together. And then what he does is point 4 is portray anybody who provides an alternative as weak, or that alternative as weak. And you've seen how he's tried to portray Zelensky as weak and Russia strong, when, of course, this is part of his ruse, because Putin is in a position of profound weakness. But I don't think it's going to fly. Let's hope it doesn't fly, because I think Trump will see through it.
Is there a chance, or how great a chance is there, that if Trump doesn't get a deal now, that he just walks away?
Well, I think the chance is very high, because, think about what Trump's summits with Kim Jong-un. And this is in 2018. And of course, President Trump can't resist a summit, right? A summit's a lot of attention. This is the reality TV President Trump at his best, right? He wants to, and I don't say this pejoratively. I'm just saying, hey, yeah. he likes the attention, and so he met with Kim Jong-un in Singapore. Remember, they kind of fell in love there. They exchanged these love letters, to use President Trump's phrase, and then there was a second summit at Hanoi, during which Kim Jong-un made unreasonable, outlandish demands, right? And Trump got up and walked away. So I think President Trump is he really is susceptible to people playing his ego, but like, what world leader isn't? Think about how Putin played Angela Merkel for like how many years, Colin? But I think ultimately he's going to come to the realization that Putin is playing him. And of course, what Trump will resent more than anything is somebody trying to humiliate him. And I think there's a high chance that Putin's smart. He's not going to do that maybe brazenly, but think about the Trump summit with Putin in Helsinki, and how Putin used that to try to humiliate Trump, by saying, oh, these
and that worked, didn't it? Because Trump aligned himself with Putin and the Russians in that one.
Well, he played President Trump there, and hopefully President Trump still has a few advisors around him, who can say, hey, look, this is how he's going to play you. Don't fall into it. And and President Trump, I mean, he's a smart guy. Like but his background is in real estate, right? He didn't run that business by being gullible, And so what I'm hoping for is that he's seen enough of a pattern himself now, right? He found it difficult maybe to learn from the experiences of others, like George W. Bush, like President Obama in his first term, because he thought, hey, they're not me, right? I'm so much smarter than them. But now that he's seen Putin, try to play him during his first term, and certainly, Putin to clearly, based on his actions, be the only obstacle to peace in Ukraine, as the one who initiated this unlawful, brutal, inhumane war against Ukrainians. And also, hey, Colin, one other thing I'll say is, Trump has a heart, right? And so, if I were prepping him for this, I would highlight, the egregious atrocities. Not only the bombing of hospitals and schools and apartment buildings and the civilian casualties, but how about the kidnapping of children? Yeah. There's more reporting coming out of this in this last week of how they're decentralizing adoption by Russians of Ukrainian children, which will make it really impossible to trace the Ukrainian children who've been stolen, who've been kidnapped out of Russian occupied portions of Ukraine. So I think I would highlight the brutality of Putin, and also show how he has been undermining our interests, Europe's interests in Africa. What he did in the Middle East by enabling Assad and the serial episodes of mass homicide in the Syrian civil war, and enabling Iran's land bridge that they used to build and then light the ring of fire around Israel. I mean, look at Russia's role overall, and look at, as I mentioned, the connection between Russia and the rest of the axis of aggressors, including China, right? And remember, the foreign minister from China just said, a couple of weeks ago, China can't afford for Russia to lose. So those who argue that Ukraine is of tertiary importance and Europeans can handle that, they neglect the profound connection between the outcome of the war in Ukraine and the security of all of us.
General HR McMaster, what a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Hey, great to be with you, Callum.
Good to get your insights. That is retired US General, former National Security Advisor to President Trump, who was on the raw end of Trump's ego, I think, when he was advising him on Russia in the past. Full of advice again today, though. HR McMaster, great to have you on.